Welcome to the top of the Glenmorangie Lighthouse. I am delighted to be here in Tain, in the Highlands of Scotland, to give you today an exclusive behind-the-scenes look into our new groundbreaking experimental distillery.
This is one of the most exciting events in the history of the Glenmorangie brand, and certainly one of the most exciting things in my career. And I have no doubt that this facility is going to inspire myself and my team to create all sorts of wonderful new products.
In a short while, Tom and Bill will talk in more depth about this fantastic building and the plans for the future and answer some of your questions. But first, let's take a look inside.
Glenmorangie Distillery has been nestled on the shores of the Dornoch Firth in the Highlands of Scotland since 1843. Over that time, our distillery has expanded again and again, and today it's a real mix of traditional and newer buildings. The most standout of all, of course, is our groundbreaking innovation distillery. It towers over the rest of the distillery, looking out at the sea, so you can understand why we call it our lighthouse. The lighthouse has been designed as a standalone experimental distillery, a kind of sensory playground, if you like, where my team of whisky creators and I can bring our wildest ideas to life. As far as we know, it's the first on-site innovation distillery dedicated to a single malt brand and created solely for experimentation. Inside, we'll be able to experiment with all aspects of whisky making, while our main distillery goes on creating the delicious signature single malt for which Glenmorangie has always been loved. There are two main parts to the lighthouse. The first is the brew house. The exterior blends in with the distillery's traditional stone buildings. However, inside we'll be able to experiment with all sorts of raw materials and fermentation in ways that are anything but traditional. For example, the mill we've installed will enable us to process all sorts of different raw materials. The mash tuns have been designed for maximum flexibility, and this will enable us to do all sorts of different mash cycles and create new flavours. Then there are the washbacks, our fermentation vessels. We can control the temperature in these, something you cannot typically do in a malt whisky distillery. Again, that will vastly increase our ability to experiment. The next part, the still house, is where we'll distill our spirit. From a visual perspective, it is stunning. The walls are made of glass, so the still house is flooded with natural light, which reflects off a pair of our giraffe-high copper stills. On the face of it, these are exact replicas of the stills you see in our main distillery. And the wash still, which produces the low wines from the first distillation, is largely as you'd expect. But the spirit still is not traditional at all. It has a number of very unusual features which will allow us to play different tunes with our spirit. The first of these is the necks of the stills. Now, Glenmorangie stills are already the tallest of any malt whisky distillery in Scotland. But in the Lighthouse, we have the capability to double the size of these. This is because the necks are double-skinned with a hollow water cooling jacket. So we'll be able to vary the temperature and increase the rate of redistillation or reflux to make an even more delicate, more complex spirit than Glenmorangie is already famed for. Then there's the purifier on the line arm of the spirit still. This collects the heavier vapours and sends them back down to the main body of the still to be redistilled. In the Lighthouse, we can switch this purifier on and off, meaning that again we can vary the rate of the reflux and make our spirit lighter or heavier as we see fit. Finally, the end of the line arm at the top of the spirit still splits in two. We can divert the vapours into a classic copper condenser or into a condenser made from stainless steel, or even a combination of the two. That means we can dramatically reduce the surface area of copper to make a much more meaty, full-bodied spirit. And to take people one step closer to the whisky making process, we've installed glass man doors in the stills, extra sight glasses in the necks of the stills, and even sight glasses on the condensers. The idea is that not only do we talk about the distilling and condensing vapours, but you'll actually get to see them for yourself. Of course, as you'd expect in any distillery, there's a spirit safe through which our spirit runs when it comes off the stills. It contains instruments to measure the strength of our spirit, so we can chart the progress of our distillation and take our spirit cuts. And all this has been made right here in Scotland by Forsyths of Rothes, in my view the best still makers in the whole world. So there we have it, our lighthouse, standing tall on the Highland coastline, just like a real lighthouse. For us, it is a beacon for all of the wondrous whiskies yet to come. And right at the very top is the sensory laboratory, my main creative space where I and my team will dream up delicious new flavours to share with the world.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us in the sensory laboratory right at the top of the Glenmorangie Innovation Distillery, the Lighthouse. I'm Ellie Goss, and I'm your MC for today. I'm joined by Glenmorangie CEO Tom Moradpour and our Director of Whisky Creation, Dr Bill Lumsden. We're here today to talk to you about our new innovation distillery, the Lighthouse. We'll be taking questions at the end, so please add your questions in the YouTube chat and we'll get through as many as we can in the time available. But first, let's hear from you, Bill. Can you tell us a bit about the backstory? What is the Lighthouse? How did it come to be?
Okay, so as you know, Ellie, I'm a research scientist by training, that's my background. So experimentation and innovation is in my blood. And since I joined the Glenmorangie company many years ago, I've enjoyed carrying out many experiments, trying all sorts of different things in terms of whisky creation. I know we've had lots of wonderful, exciting new products from that. But there are certain things I wanted to do, some dreams I had, which I simply could not do in the main distillery. So the Lighthouse is the result of this, to try and allow me to do different things.
Thanks. And are there, Bill, are there other distilleries like this here in Scotland, elsewhere in the world?
There's certainly nothing else like it here in Scotland, and I would be surprised if there was anything like it anywhere else in the world, because we've got so much unique new equipment here and we're going to be trying all sorts of different things.
I look forward to hearing more about those sorts of things. Thank you. Tom, you took over as Glenmorangie CEO in 2018. Can you please tell us how the Lighthouse figures in your long-term plans for the distillery and for the Glenmorangie brand around the world?
Well, Ellie, Bill has probably forgotten more about whiskey than I will ever learn. But there's one thing I know, and one thing I remember as a CEO, is that if we don't make it at the Glenmorangie distillery, we cannot call it Glenmorangie. It's the first rule of selling single malt. And that means that if we forget to distill this year, well, guess what? In 10 years, in 15 years, in 18 years, we have nothing to sell. So it's really important for us to project ourselves into the future. And since every litre of Glenmorangie made at distillery is sold as Glenmorangie and nothing else, well, we'd better make sure that we think about the future when we decide how much to distill. Too little, and in 10 years, in 15 years, we'll be constrained, we don't have enough to sell. Too much, well, it's another kind of problem. It's the kind of problem that we're paid to solve, launching new markets, launching new products, being creative, investing in the brands to make it more desirable. Today, our decision is to invest, to distill 2.5 times our level of current sales. Now, I don't know what our level of sales will be in 10 years, in 18 years. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do have confidence that we can grow our brands, that the current momentum of the category and of our brand will project us into the future. The point is, every time we think about this brand, every time we manage a distillery, we have to think 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ahead. This building is about thinking about what comes next. It's not about taking us to our success in the next decade. It's about sustaining that success with new products, with innovation, with new tastes for the consumers of the future.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So we've talked about the possibilities that the Lighthouse opens up in terms of flavour and creating new spirits. Bill, we want to hear about those future innovations.
Of course.
But first, can we orientate ourselves in the world of Glenmorangie? Can you tell us a bit about the style and character of the distillery?
I can indeed tell you, Ellie, but I can go one stage better than that. We can actually taste the Glenmorangie Original to get a feel for this. So, you know, Glenmorangie Original is very, very special in my life because it was the very first single malt Scotch whisky I ever tasted many, many years ago when I was at university. And that first magical sip pretty much determined that my future career path lay in the Scotch whisky industry. And what I loved about Glenmorangie Original was that it had this amazing soft, silky texture and an incredibly complex flavour palette. So why don't we try it?
Okay.
So beautiful, bright gold colour. And in this expression, the use of unique mineral-rich spring water, distillation in the tallest copper pot stills of any malt whisky distillery in Scotland. You know, they're as tall as the neck of an adult giraffe, in fact. And then maturation in the very finest American oak ex-bourbon barrels all comes together to make this truly wonderful whisky. And on the nose, it's incredibly perfumed. It's delicate, but you know, it's intense at the same time. Lovely floral notes, a little bit of fruitiness in there, like peach or citrus fruit, something like that. And if you'd like to join me in a sip. You know, the texture in the mouth is beautiful. It just caresses your palate. It's silky smooth, lovely sweet flavours like vanilla or almond or coconut. And you know, I just find the whole thing so beguiling. And if I was to sum this up in one word, that would be delicious. So that's the Glenmorangie house style.
And indeed, it is delicious. So that's Glenmorangie, as most people know it around the world. Now, Bill, you've been known in the industry for a long time as someone who likes to experiment, try new things, and come up with lots of interesting limited editions and special bottlings, haven't you?
Yes, indeed. And you know, the fact that I get bored very easily, I think, is a good thing because it's led me to want to try different things. It's got me into trouble from time to time, of course, but it's made me want to try and experiment and try different things. And you know, over the years we've had wonderful success in the company with many of these creations, and I'm thinking perhaps of the Glenmorangie Private Edition range, where every year for 10 years we released a new product which showcased a different aspect of innovation or creativity. And then, of course, in some respects, my magnum opus was Glenmorangie Signet. And you know, I had the first idea for that many, many years ago when I was a student, inspired by the amazing taste of Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee, which, of course, as you know, is what James Bond drinks. So I was going to drink it as well.
Do you think you're James Bond?
Not quite. I'm maybe a bit too old for that now, Ellie. But you know, it was that idea of the roasting of the beans, bringing out different flavours, and it merged together with my newfound love of malt whisky, and it led to the creation of Glenmorangie Signet.
Did it?
Indeed.
It's always good to have a taste of Glenmorangie Signet, isn't it, Bill? And I think some of our viewers may have some Glenmorangie Signet
I
with
certainly
them.
hope so, and just by coincidence we've got some here, Ellie.
Indeed.
So this is very, very different. I mean, with the original, think of delicacy and finesse, but with Signet there's a bit more depth and power to it. And again on the nose, wow, all these lovely mocha, coffee, chocolate, almond, biscotti type notes. And again, if we try a sip. You know, I always find it's like an explosion in the mouth. It still has that classic Glenmorangie creaminess on the palate, but the flavours are deeper and more intense. Of course, there's the coffee and the chocolate. There's a nice spiciness in there, you know, sizzling spices like cinnamon, ginger, clove. And then finally, on the aftertaste, you get some more classic Glenmorangie flavours, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of citrus fruit.
It's always good to have an excuse to taste it, isn't
amazing.
it, Bill? It really is absolutely delicious. So how exactly will this new distillery open up new areas of innovation? I mean, come on, Bill. What do you plan to make here?
Okay, I mean, I'm not going to tell you everything, Ellie, and if I'm honest about it, I don't even know everything myself yet until I start using it. But certainly, there was a lot of things I wanted to try which I simply couldn't do in the main distillery. So the Lighthouse was specifically designed to allow me to overcome these barriers. So we've got a whole new brew house, which will allow me, of course, to process malted barley, but it'll allow me to process other raw materials and create a completely different range of products. And the still house is a technological marvel, and I still can't get my head around how they managed to do this. But the stills at Glenmorangie are, as I said earlier, the tallest in the Scotch whisky industry. But we've got special technology there which will metaphorically almost double the height of the stills. We've got a purifier in the line arm. We can do all sorts of things, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to create just about every style of spirit you can think of in the still house.
So they'll be able to be even taller than an adult male giraffe.
I would say so.
Now, come on, Bill. I know some areas are extremely secret, but our audience, they want to know more. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the special equipment?
I can tell you a tiny little bit more, and certainly I already know some of the first things I'm going to do there, and of course we have to proof the system by running water through it, but we have the capability to divert fermented wash from the main distillery down, and that's one of the first things I'm going to do to try and run the stills. And I know that this sounds sort of counterintuitive, but the first thing I will do is make classic Glenmorangie spirit. And once I've satisfied myself that all the equipment works, the gloves are off, and I'm going to try all sorts of different things.
Giving a little bit. Can you give us a little taste of what the first experiments inside the Lighthouse might include?
Okay, I'm being deliberately very coy and evasive here, Ellie, but one of the things we have in this plant is a completely different type of washbacks. And I studied my PhD thesis on fermentation science. It's always been a subject close to my heart. But with the washbacks we have here in the Lighthouse, I can actually control the temperature. So that will allow me to greatly lengthen the fermentation, and who knows what flavours we'll create. I don't even know, but I'm very excited to find out.
It does sound exciting, doesn't it, Tom?
It does.
So, Tom, how long are we going to have to wait before these experiments are ready to bring to the market and take to consumers?
Well, whiskey takes a minimum of 3 years to be called legally whiskey, but that will probably be 5 to 10 years before some of those experiments actually get released into the wild. But it doesn't matter. We're not focused only on quarterly sales, as I told you before. It's all about the long game, taking the long view. So we'll be patient.
Patient. Patience, absolutely.
Patience.
It's a virtue.
I guess it is.
And part of that legacy, Tom, is this incredible building, isn't it? I mean, we've heard from Bill about some of the bells and whistles that can be found inside. But let's zoom out a little and talk about the architecture. I mean, it truly is a beautiful building.
It is a stunning building, and Barthélemy Grignot, our architect based in Paris, did a fantastic job working with us for 5 years on this project. It's actually not one building, but two buildings, and those two buildings are a blend of our tradition and our projection into the future, our modernity. The first building is the brew house. The brew house in style is in keeping with the style of the main distillery. It's very, I would say, traditional in its material and look, while the still house itself is very modern. It's a 20-meter high, tower made of glass and wood that creates this stunning view from the shore and in the distillery. And that's is a symbol of our connection between a big heritage. We've been here since 1843, and our desire to project ourselves into the future. And even inside that tower that represents the future, there is a nod to our heritage. The woods that we've used behind the glass on the walls of the distillery actually contain some casks of Glenmorangie. And so those casks have been ground, they've been used into those, they've been fused into the wood panels. And guess what? The whiskey itself that was in the cask has been released at the distillery as an exclusive release, marking the occasion of the opening of the Lighthouse.
How wonderful.
Yes. So that's one aspect of the that's one aspect of design. Another aspect of the design is actually the reason we call it a lighthouse.
Yeah.
And it's called a lighthouse because, like a lighthouse, it is planted in the ground. It's not moving. It's an immovable object. You know, we've been here since 1843. We're not going anywhere. So, you know, like a lighthouse, we are planted in the ground, and you know, the lighthouse helps us see to the horizon and project our vision to the horizon much further. And in fact, this gives us a new perspective, a different perspective on the place we're in, and on also on the business. This very room, we're broadcasting from today, has a view, the most spectacular view, I want to say, on the Dornoch Firth, which is our natural habitat, our environment. It's absolutely beautiful. We've always known that it was beautiful, but we had never seen it from this point, from this higher perspective, and it's opened our eyes to how beautiful this environment can be. It's a bit of the same idea that guides the Lighthouse as an experimental distillery. It's still the same expertise, the same craft of making whiskey, but with a new perspective that will help us see it, you know, in many new creative ways.
Cool. And it has, I mean, you've talked about the views. You've talked about the views of the Dornoch Firth, and we're sitting right here on the banks of the Dornoch Firth. I mean, can you tell me about Glenmorangie's, how Glenmorangie views its place in the environment?
You know, we're not going anywhere. A single malt whiskey like Glenmorangie can only be made here. There is no moving it somewhere else. There is no making Glenmorangie at another distillery in another country or even in a different place. So we see it as absolutely paramount that we not only preserve the environment that we're in, but that we actually enhance it, because we're in it for a long game. We're committed. We're 100% committed to this place. So that's why we look at this environment and think, okay, what can we do to make it better? 5 years ago, we opened an anaerobic digestion plant, which actually takes the byproducts of distilling, which is water with organic materials, which in the old days used to be pumped into the sea, and now that plant actually takes all the organic material out of the water. So everything that comes out is 99% pure water, and the product itself, the byproduct, is converted into a biogas that we use to reduce our carbon footprint and fuel the distillery, fuel this very building. So it's a very circular view, very circular economy of our environment. Then, the 1% that are there are going to be eaten and filtered by oysters. I'm not sure you knew that oysters were natural filters. Okay. Oysters went extinct in the Dornoch Firth 100 years ago due to overfishing, and we've been working on a project called Deep for a few years to restore an oyster reef inside the Firth. We've hit a milestone this year with 20,000 oysters set in the Firth, and we're on the way to creating a reef of 4 million oysters, which will make this. Which will restore the biodiversity and the balance of the Firth and make it a very, very, very clean environment going forward.
How awesome and how clever are those oysters, Bill?
Oh gosh,
it's really inspiring to hear how Glenmorangie is regenerating this beautiful corner of the Highlands while still creating absolutely delicious whiskey. Now, we have time for a couple of questions from those who are watching on YouTube. But first, I have a couple of questions. So, Bill, you've been here working at Glenmorangie for 26 years?
Yes, that's correct.
How have things changed over that time?
There's been a lot of very interesting changes in the Scotch whisky industry in that time. And one of the biggest ones is that just the rise and rise and rise in popularity of single malt Scotch whisky. Because when I started, it was much more difficult to find, but now it's been democratized and it's much more widely available. So that's been very exciting because, of course, we focus on single malt in our company. And one of the other big changes was in 2005, the Glenmorangie company was bought by LVMH, Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton. And that basically opened up a whole new world to us here. And we've had such great investment. And this would not have happened in the old days.
Indeed.
So yeah, there's always something changing, even although it's a very traditional industry.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. And Tom, one for you. What was your first impression when you joined the Glenmorangie company?
Well, believe it or not, my first impression was breaking ground of this project. And on my very first day.
Your first day?
My first day was in here, was 20 meters below this table. And on my first day, we broke ground for construction of the lighthouse. So it's there's a lot of emotion for me.
Yeah.
3 years later, to be opening finally this new distillery with Bill, and it's been a fantastic 3 years.
Yeah. So we've now got some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Let's take them.
First one. Can you tell us a little about how you'll be able to experiment with fermentation in the lighthouse?
Yes, of course. In the Scotch whisky industry, obviously fermentation is an important part of the process. But in my view, as a trained fermentation scientist, I always feel it's been ever so slightly neglected. So with the plant we have here, I'll be able to use many different types of yeasts and maybe even other microorganisms to ferment. But the most exciting thing is I think we've got temperature control in the fermenters. And in the wine industry, they typically have much longer fermentations because they control the temperature, and it creates all sorts of new flavours. So I'm very excited about the potential, the flavour potential of what we have here.
I'm quite excited. Next question. Was this a challenging job for the still makers?
I think it was possibly one of the most challenging jobs they've ever done. And there was no question we were going to go to Forsyths of Rothes, who are absolutely the best in the business. But there's many different aspects to the stills down there. And the most challenging one was actually the necks are hollow because they have a water cooling jacket. And I initially wanted something mechanical to double the height of the stills, but that really was not going to be practical.
And we need a bigger building.
Indeed, it would have to be 30 metres. So the water cooling jacket metaphorically doubles the height, and it'll allow me to play around with the rate of reflux in distillation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bill. How long has this building been in the planning, Tom?
Well, it took 5 years. 5 years, between the day Bill came to my predecessor with a request for a huge amount of money to build something groundbreaking, and got some money to build this. So a little less than when you're...
It was a classic
a little more,
negotiation.
exactly. So, but millions of pounds later and 5 years later, we are here today after working with our architects, our engineers, all of the teams at Glenmorangie, and our Scottish partners to build this fantastic distillery.
Indeed, thank you. I read somewhere that its stills will also be used to make whiskey from things other than malted barley. Is that true?
Really? Where did you read that?
This is from one of our audience, Bill.
Yeah, I will neither confirm or deny that, but what I will say is, of course, we have the capability to use not only malted barley, but other cereals, and once I really get my teeth into this, other raw materials, all sorts of unusual and weird things.
Curious and curiouser. When will the aged spirits made from the distillery reach the African market?
Probably 5, 10, 15 years. We'll have to see. It really depends on what the experiment is. It depends on what works, what doesn't work, what tastes great, how the African consumer tastes, palate, and appetite for innovation matures. So you can expect new things in the next decade, probably towards the end of the decade, and until then, there will be plenty of other news, plenty of other initiatives from Glenmorangie in Africa. And Africa is a place of growth. It's a place of development. We are absolutely excited and very active in many countries in the Africa and Middle East markets. So expect to see things coming from Glenmorangie in the next 10 years, and things coming from the Lighthouse maybe a little bit after that.
Okay. Thank you. When is the Lighthouse open to the public for tours, Tom?
I'm afraid not. So it might actually not be open to me. I think your first day plan is to change the locks.
Absolutely. Large padlock on the door.
I'm not sure you or I are going to
The Lighthouse is going to be a very private, secret place. There's a large window in the middle of the building where our visitors and guests can get a peek for what's happening inside. You can see some of the bells and whistles that Bill has added.
Not all of them.
Some of them. You can take a guess, maybe at what those bells and whistles do. But the building itself is off limits. The content of the building is secret and will not be open to the public.
Okay, thank you. When will distilling at the Glenmorangie Lighthouse begin?
Okay, so we're just about complete with the project, and I'm very hopeful that in October we will be running water through the plant, and then towards the end of October I think we'll be distilling wash and producing some spirit. So that's the plan.
Okay, thank you. How far will you be pushing experimentation at the Lighthouse? Will the experiments all fall within the current SWA guidelines, or will you create some spirits just to see how they might turn out?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I will be wanting to make some products which will be called not only Scotch whisky, but Glenmorangie Scotch whisky, but I have the capability to make other things. So again, I'm neither going to confirm or deny this.
I'm trying. The Scotch whisky industry has been growing at a phenomenal rate. Do you think this will continue?
Yes, absolutely yes. In fact, if we didn't believe this, we would stop distilling more than we sell today. There's no, there is absolutely no doubt that a company that sells this amount and distills this amount believes that growth is going to happen, because what we distill today is what we believe we can sell in 10 years. So we not just believe that growth will continue and that we can enjoy category growth and market share gains. We don't only believe this, we actually put our money where our mouth is by distilling whiskey, putting into casks, more casks that we buy, building warehouses to put those new casks in, and having the patience to let it mature for 10 years to sell it around the world.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of patience again. Bill, last question.
Okay.
Where do you get your inspiration from for all your different whiskies?
Yeah, there's no easy one answer to that, and I take inspiration from anywhere and everywhere I find it. And for example, I've always had a very vivid imagination. My imagination can sometimes run away with me, as you know, Ellie, but I have vivid dreams almost every night, and I often scribble down the details of the dream when I wake up the next morning, and that can lead to inspiration. Having a simple conversation, and Tom said something during this broadcast today, which has already given me a new product idea.
Well done.
Yeah. And when I visit other countries and meet new people, try different cuisines, that inspires me, particularly in terms of trying to create new flavours. And as you know, wine is one of my loves and hobbies, and drinking different types of wine, that inspires me also.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll say something that gives you an idea. That's about all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us to launch this wonderful distillery, the Lighthouse, our new innovation distillery. I'm sorry we weren't able to welcome you here in person, but hopefully sometime soon we will be able to welcome you here in Scotland, in the Highlands, at Glenmorangie Distillery. But for now, stay well, stay happy, stay safe. Slash.